Good morning. Hope everyone's settling in, having a nice breakfast. Welcome. My name is Juan Zarate. Welcome to the CFR event. Looking ahead, blockchain and its impact on democracy, finance, and national security. I'm really honored to be up here with three deep experts and colleagues and friends. To my left, Dante Disparte, the Chief Strategy Officer and Head of Global Policy for Circle. Dante and I have the chance to work together often in the private sector, so it's really a pleasure to be with you, Dante. Donna Riddell, Adjunct Professor of Blockchain and Digital Assets at Fordham Law School. Professor, welcome. We hope to learn from you today. Thank you. And last but not least, Joseph Lubin, CEO of ConsenSys Inc., one of the deep experts and one of the great firms working in the digital asset space, in particular with Ethereum. So we're looking forward to learning from Joe today. As I said, I'm Juan Zarate. I'm the global co-managing partner for K2 Integrity. My claim to fame is not only knowing Dante, but also being the first advisor to Coinbase back in 2013, 2014. So been watching this space very carefully, especially through the lens of national security. So it's an honor to be with you today. We'll have a conversation up here for about 30 minutes, and then we'll open it up to you. This is on the record. Keep that in mind. So watch your language, please. And let's go for it. Let me set the table a little bit for the conversation, and then we'll dig in, because these are big topics, not just the technology, but the issues of democracy, the nature and the future of the financial system, and national security. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to cover everything in an hour, but let's try to set the table. I think we're in an interesting moment in the context of both the technology and the policy. The technology has evolved in very interesting ways, and we'll get into that. New use cases, imagining of even better use cases for purposes of the future of the financial system, efficiency, and public policy goals. And we've also been through phases of perception of the technology. In the beginning, early days, it was sort of a technology emerging in the garage of some interesting companies and people in Silicon Valley. It then became a question of risk, systemic risk, fraud risk, anti-money laundering risk. And we had the various cases that emerged as a result, and a lot of skepticism that grew as a result. Then a bit of euphoria with respect to the market, the bull run, Coinbase emerging publicly, a whole set of things that started to legitimate the technology, and in particular, the crypto currency ecosystem. And then the crypto winter, the skepticism, the regulatory crackdowns here in the United States, which then drew further skepticism. And now it feels like we're in a period of policy and market euphoria again. We're on the brink of Bitcoin at almost $100,000, which in some ways was the wild imaginings of folks just a few months ago when Bitcoin had dropped down to 15,000, you recall. Folks sort of imagining, when might it hit 100,000? Well, we may be on the brink as we sit here today. So let's talk about all this, because there are so many fundamental issues at play when you talk about the technology. Joe, let's start with you. We have a great audience. I can see a lot of people in the industry and who are real experts, some who are new to the technology. Can you level set for us sort of the state of blockchain technology, kind of where it sits and where it's going from your perspective?
Sure. Thanks for having me here today. The bigger picture is that blockchain, or Web3, as I prefer to call it, is the natural evolution of the internet protocols and the web protocols. And so the internet protocols were built on open protocols and open specifications. Web 1 started in 1989. Again, open protocols, open specifications. All that was built in a very decentralized fashion. So power, technology, et cetera, was widely distributed. Towards the dot-com boom, there became such a big prize, so much value moving into the industry, into the ecosystem. I think if decentralized protocols existed and were mature enough, developers probably would have tried to build social media, e-commerce, et cetera, on that technology, but they simply weren't strong enough. They weren't scalable enough. And so what we ended up with are silos, moats, walled gardens, and that was great for the world for quite a while. It led to globalization, but it ended up turning pretty toxic because big technology ended up knowing more about us than we know. Add little AI to that, and they started doing effectively psychological experiments on the population at times, which a little bit disturbing. So big tech has turned into a weapon of mass manipulation that is available not just to American interests, if you'll pay for it, but also to foreign enemy interests to manipulate the American populace. And big tech plus AI, if it remains centralized, will become the most powerful weapon or tool of control that we can imagine. So Web3 is being built with open specifications, open protocols. It represents the re-decentralization of the World Wide Web. So it is essentially also a flipping of the vector of trust. So trust in the world for millennia has operated via authorities, top down through intermediaries. All the intermediaries maintain a ledger or database of who owns what, who has what rights and responsibilities. Satoshi Nakamoto comes along and he invents this new paradigm, decentralized trust. And so that enables us to build a database for the world. It's open, it's inspectable. People can upload programs. People can permissionlessly use those programs. And so we have a new trust foundation for the planet, a radically decentralized foundation for essentially re-architecting all the systems of the world. So the first systems, many different projects were tried, but the first system that gained real traction was this idea that we could take everything that we built, everything we need, everything we've learned in traditional finance, and reimagine it in the form of decentralized finance, more open, more fair, more transparent, more secure. And so based on a new trust foundation and a new decentralized financial infrastructure, we can now cross the chasm into mainstream culture because we're now, after many years of building, we're now scalable enough, we're now affordable enough in terms of block space and transactions, we're now usable enough, and there are innovations coming so that it's going to be very usable for people, even better than the internet. And it might even become legal in the United States to work in this industry. Even though there are no laws against it, it has effectively been illegal for us to work in this industry for certain reasons based on the current regime.
Joe, that's a great baseline. So thank you for that. I'm going to come back to you on some of the innovations where you see this playing out in democratization and in the financial system. I want to key off your theme, though, of centralization, decentralization, because that's at the heart of both the design as well as some of the regulatory pressures. And Professor Riddell, I want to turn to you to give us a baseline in terms of how the U.S. regulators and authorities and the legal structure has sort of reacted to or is adapting to the new technology, and how you compare that to what's happening internationally. And then Dante, I'm going to turn to you for a couple of important follow-on questions. Professor?
Well, I think that it's clear that the industry has been asking for a long time for clarity of regulation. That doesn't mean we needed it from the onset, because regulation sometimes can stymie innovation. But we needed to know a clear pathway of where you can innovate, where are the gray areas, where's the touchstones, and for at least the regulators to start to understand what is the power of this new technology, how it's going to change the dynamics, and how it's making money move in real time. And that is a fundamental difference from where we have been. So if we say that the internet enabled information to move in real time, and now that you have digital assets on top of blockchains in all different other kinds of ways, you have a system that works 24/7. But we're constrained into a system on a regulatory basis and also in a financial world that doesn't operate like that at all. And so when I have the ability to take, and I'll get into what Dante's will talk about, a coin, a stable coin, backed by US dollars, treasuries, and move it to somebody that is my loved one, let's say in France, in Philippines, in anywhere that I want to support. Maybe they're in trouble, or maybe I help pay part of their rent. It happens instantaneously, and so when new financial technology comes along, there's always a press back. But the press back should enable innovation to happen, not stymie innovation. It should enable the regulatory framework to expand, not to contract around it. And so I think that the US has not gone down that pathway. The new administration has indicated they will put in a series of regulations that make sense. There have been many, many bills that have gone to Congress, but we know, even though this is Washington, Congress has not been the most helpful organization in getting bills passed. So I think that in 2025, we will see the U.S. walk down the path of a good stablecoin bill. I think we'll have a reasonable chance at a comprehensive market bill, and people will understand that they can operate, grow, and prosper in the U.S. as innovators, as users, et cetera, instead of many, many of these protocols having features that block U.S. persons, that actually have code in the coin that says you cannot go into a U.S. person's wallet, as you can't go into a North Korean's or this or the, or Venezuelans, et cetera. And I think we should be supporting innovation instead of trying to go like this to it.
Donna, I'm going to come back to you in a second to talk about how you view the Europeans and others regulating the sector and how that either matches or competes with what you think is coming from the U.S. But Dante, I want to turn to you in part because you've been almost one of the leading spokespersons for the industry. You've had different roles. You've seen it evolve. How do you think about the evolution of the perception of blockchain technologies, in particular what Circle's trying to do with USDC and stablecoins?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's an honor to be here with you, Juan, and with such luminaries on the panel with me. I mean, the first point is just to kind of anchor this in what I think is one of the biggest gaps we have in the United States right now, and frankly in the West, which is a deep technophobia. There's a very, very deep overcorrection from some of the issues that Joe described of overreach from big tech and the dependency that so much of society has on tools and services for which the terms of service agreement points to a single postal code in Silicon Valley. And so the overcorrection over the last 5 years especially has been, let's then stop any novel form of technological innovation to compete. And sure, there have been in the decade of digital assets sort of going through their boom and bust cycle, or crypto winters, or frankly, in some cases, a crypto ice age. There have been some really teachable, eye-watering lessons in unchecked fraud, unchecked greed, and all kinds of market conduct that in some ways vindicates the regulatory fear and the policy fear. But at the same time, every single organization, including, for example, FTX Japan, that was brought into the regulatory perimeter, ended up not only being able to return funds to their customers, but also show that the more you put principles in place versus prescriptions, you could in fact have a technology-neutral regulatory regime. And so that then gets to what's the state of play in the United States. So, my company Circle has uploaded the US dollar onto the internet. We've done so in a manner that would put to shame the type of prudential risk you would see in large systemic banks, because there's no fractionalization, there's no maturity transformation, and we're literally paying homage to the full faith and credit of the US banking system and the full faith and credit, of course, of the central bank, and import those policy principles and priorities. We would also not be deserving of a CFR stage if we didn't cage this in geopolitics, geostrategy, and competitive realities around the world. If your and my financial needs took a break like the banking system takes bank holidays, then we would fail to perform in the 21st century. Just look backwards at the COVID-19 pandemic, and we moved government to citizen payments to the tune of trillions, and we couldn't do it fast at the speed of human need in our society because we don't have fast open payment systems. Guess what? If you use public blockchain infrastructure, basic free mobile enabled wallets, and a digital currency like a stablecoin, you wouldn't have had anything close to the fraud, the mismanagement, and the slow movement of money, even domestically. That's a domestic security vulnerability that China, Russia, and competitive countries didn't visit upon the United States. It's the void of competitive open payments domestically. And so that should be a technology neutral policy objective to ensure that anyone anywhere can get access to the financial system. The tech is the easy part. And so just to cage this then in both the opportunity and a little bit of a reflection, having had the awkward witness seat in most of the global hearings and domestic ones on this innovation, is imagine stopping the development of the internet at the worldwide wait phase, because it was a dark web before it became the ubiquitous fabric of the global economy that we take for granted today. That's exactly what the policy environment has done to this technology. And it's time-stamped it towards the worst activities as opposed to the best activities. The Biden administration was the first US administration to put out an executive order for a whole of government study of this technology. And I was encouraged by that. I even wrote an article in Project Syndicate about it. And unfortunately, crypto decided to have a crash. Guess what triggered the crash? Misdeeds, misbehavior, and people. Because people will co-opt any technology, including digital assets and blockchains, and the technologies are imperfect, but they often show us where status quo falls short. And there's no better, no clearer place than money. And so what we do at Circle with stablecoins, the term of art is a horrible term of art, frankly, because not all stablecoins are created equal. But we've literally created a digital dollar. And in the span of 6 years, we've gone from zero to availability in more than 200 countries. And we've processed in that same time frame more than $17 trillion in cumulative activity. We've done so in an open manner, which overcomes the most insidious issue in payments, which is the walled garden problem. Today, a major payments company's service no longer works for some strange reason, because so much of the financial infrastructure that we depend on, remember Equifax, is single points of failure honeypot databases that monetize your information forever and expose you to personal identity theft risks and other risks for the rest of your natural life. So I think re-architecting this, last word, and I know you have a full suite of questions to ask the panel, re-architecting this where the internet was a genuinely disruptive technology. And the best that you could do if you were a content provider was erect a firewall, which was a feeble defense against the onset of the internet. Actual blockchain infrastructure is an augmenting technology. Few firms are being disrupted by blockchains. The ones that are embracing it look analogous to embracing cloud computing. So if we think of this as foundational infrastructure, the question then is, well, what activity could I do now that I could extend it a little bit further in the same way that Donna and Joe just described?
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on one thing, because since it is the council, the stable coins that are backed by U.S. treasuries are helping the government be able to keep the dollar as an important reserve globally, because people are using all over the world these stable coins backed by U.S. treasuries, I believe, and the figure may have changed, but it's at least in the top 10 holders, the stablecoin aggregated companies of U.S. treasuries, which makes them very important for promoting the dollar around the world against what is now, let's say, central bank digital currencies of China. And I've heard that China, Russia, and Brazil might want to do one together, where they're not going to have privacy, and they're going to be able to track the movements of money that goes throughout the system, the global system. And that, I think, is something that the U.S. government should be very concerned. I know they are very concerned about, but helping to create an environment in which we know the regulatory certainty, we can grow this in a way that is helpful for the U.S. government, helpful for the economy, and globally secures the position of ourselves in ways that the government sees and the individual sees as something that is in our future interests, is really important.
Yeah, can I
Yeah,
add
go ahead,
two
Joe.
pieces? So It is great to have a more diversified set of lenders for the United States, as certain lenders are pulling back on their desire to lend to the United States. And so there are just many projects, one great one, many other projects that are interested in issuing stablecoins. We could see white labeled stablecoins, et cetera. So it really could become the dominant currency of Web3. B, it is very important for the people of the world to all have access, permissionless, effectively access to a stable currency. So if you're living under a regime that is abusing the currency, you can protect your assets by being in digital currencies, by being in a stablecoin currency, but you're also weakening that nation state. And so one could frame decentralized protocol technology as consistent with the principles of the United States of America, going back to the founding fathers, consistent with Western liberal democracy, and so enabling decentralized re-architecting of the world and enabling everybody in the world to have stable currency in their digital wallet will enable the American experiment to perhaps be extended.
I want to come back to that, Joe, because there have been, in some ways, pilots and projects to do exactly that, to square the circle around U.S. policy and the use of the technology, aid and capital moving into Venezuela, for example, out of the hands of the Maduro regime, looking at this in Afghanistan under Taliban control to make sure the Taliban can't get access to money, for example, to women's groups, et cetera. Ukraine aid has also, we've seen crypto being used to support activists there. So I want to come back to that because I think it's a really important point. But let me ask you this. I'm going to be provocative with a couple of these questions intentionally. Why haven't more of these use cases emerged? And I'm going to ask you too, Dante, because we know the payment system is inefficient. The banking system's not on 24/7. Remittances are too expensive, onerous. We have these pockets around the world, conflict zones and otherwise, that would benefit from this. Why hasn't it taken hold in the way that we've imagined? So, Joe, let me ask you that first.
Sure. So, as you can imagine, this is a big paradigm shift, and it may be the biggest paradigm shift in the evolution of human society. So we're talking, the internet was a massive paradigm shift. It enabled lots of people and companies to go online, but still you're accessing the internet through a screen, pretty two-dimensional. Web3 is going to pervade everything. With decentralized physical infrastructure, et cetera, all the world's systems are going to be on this new trust foundation. And so we spent years, Satoshi Nakamoto did their work in 2008, 2009. The Ethereum project started in 2014. So we've spent years building layer after layer, module after module, of scalability and functionality. And so we knew when we started the project that we'd be building a toy system. And it was a very powerful toy system that enabled people to understand how to write the programs that run on blockchain. Effectively, we've gone through many different iterations of the protocol to enable us to build something that is just very recently scalable enough so that we can start to support real-world systems. So again, scalable enough, affordable enough, usable enough, hopefully legal and promoted in the United States of America. And so we've seen some projects, we've seen finance nerds get excited to join the crypto nerds to build out decentralized finance. We've seen art nerds get excited to build out the NFT ecosystem and even the meme coin ecosystem. And we really need people and Web 2 developers from all niches to re-architect things, and that's picking up steam quite dramatically.
I think that what we've been doing is building the foundational components, and there've been many developers, finance people, legal people, et cetera, working on that. What we haven't been able to do is make it really easy for individuals to use in a seamless way yet. Yes, the nerdy people know how to use it, but that's not the same thing.
No offense, by the way.
No, you are all nerdy. You're totally nerds. But that doesn't mean, and my students, whether they're law students or business school students, they generally know how to use it. But when you go up the ladder in the same way that people didn't know how to use the internet or still felt uncomfortable with it, there's something new. You're nervous, you're scared. And technology should be something that we can roll out in a bite-sized, comprehensible way that people slowly, and all of a sudden you're there. And that's where I think we're going now. So if we can fix the clouds of the regulatory structure, if we can have easy methodologies that people can enter into this permissionless world, and that builds the trust foundation, whether it is using Ethereum blockchain or using Circle stablecoins or payments. But you hear every major company talking about how they're entering this world. So I think they will create easy ways for access. And I think that's the big thing.
Nanda, you've been climbing this mountain for a while. What's been the struggle here? Is it the lack of regulatory clarity? Is it the lack of scaling and technology, lack of just sort of comfort with the paradigm shift? What's really holding the industry and the technology back?
Yeah, so I guess you asked a question which is in some respects applying a purity test to an industry that incumbents have had hundreds of years of a head start to address. For example, neither a physical dollar nor a digital dollar has agency. And so your question about, well, why aren't more people then explicitly able to show progress on financial inclusion issues, which for many in fintech, not just crypto, is a fig leaf. And then as I sat there getting grilled by the then chair, Sherrod Brown, in the Senate Banking Committee on the scorecard of my company and others in this space to make progress here, I said, well, it's obvious that if neither a physical or a digital dollar has agency, then you need to be very deliberate in constructing a value chain that then makes it very easy to make real progress. And so again, in the context of CFR, the world's most important cash flow is peer-to-peer payments, remittances. It's bigger than official development assistance and bigger than foreign direct investment. And typically, it's recession resistant, typically. But if you want to introduce competition there, then you need both ends of the transaction to be equipped with digital wallets. You need blockchains that actually work. And the good news is the technologists and the technologies are not standing still. So you're achieving over time Visa scale transaction throughput on open financial infrastructure. And the last piece of the puzzle, and so some of the countries you described are actually projects Circle has been very directly involved in. Pandemic relief in Venezuela for a corruption-resistant, instant, auditable, completely compliant money flow that arrives at the palms of the doctors addressing the pandemic. USDC was the digital currency supporting this project, but it was done with the blessing of the US government, of OFAC, of state. But on the receiving end, the wallet provider is a local organization called AirTM. Powerful network of moving digital money that's corruption resistant. Think of the alternative in the aid context. A pallet of physical cash flown to the Bagram air base is not only a logistical nightmare, it's a honeypot for corruption, bribery, and fraud.
Be nice if we controlled that base, but that's a different question.
not to mention an ugly chapter in our history. Yeah. But I think we're architecting collectively a completely distinct blueprint for how you could deliver impact. And to Joe's point earlier and Donna's point earlier, this is an idea of people selecting a political economy that is a very powerful, uniquely Western idea. And so over time, the more we get legal and regulatory clarity could only then raise all ships in the same way that we needed laws to enable this kind of proliferation of the internet, its first version. We're going to need rule of law also to proliferate a set of standards here. And then the last quick piece of the puzzle is, there is a reason nation states triggered this central bank digital currency space race. It's because when these technologies actually do work, and the first killer use case, of course, is money and the movement of money, which is monopolistic or duopolistic if we're lucky. Then you start to see some pretty big implications for how money moves around the world, pretty big implications for the role of the dollar in the 21st century. The dollar enjoys its extraordinary privileges, partly because of a fluke, but mostly because of free market competition and ensuring that the dollar could reach under any shade tree anywhere in the world. And now we have a whole cross-section of humanity that depend on technology for dollar access. And these types of products and services and networks are getting us there.
Yeah, and to just pick up on well, at least one of the things that Dante said, between the U.S. and Latin America, South America, and Mexico, et cetera, there has been so much movement of stablecoin, and principally because, number one, as Joe had mentioned, their currencies are unstable. AirTM, which Dante brought up, is working with stablecoin in order for people, regular people that are involved in the gig economy, people selling something on Etsy or otherwise like that, to create for them a regulatory compliant way in which to be able to get paid and also, keep the money in their wallets instead of having to give it into a banking system that may not A, be dependable, B, there's deflation all the time of their own currency, and their ability to hold U.S. dollars is constrained by all kinds of regulations with whether it's moving money in Argentina, Brazil, et cetera. So we have people that are involved in the economic system using U.S. dollars, getting paid, being able to protect themselves against the terrible deflation and inflation that's happening in their country. And this is all happening because of innovation around this technology.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the origin story of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong having gone down, having read the white paper, and then having gone to Argentina and sort of having kind of a revelation down there for precisely those reasons. Two more quick questions, and then we'll turn to the audience. Joe, I want to ask you, maybe just taking a step back, because firms like Circle, Coinbase, yours have been calling for regulation. But there's a lot of tension in the developer community, even the technology community, around too much involvement of the government. The great work of firms like TRM Labs and others that can trace using open ledger technology, even the clawback. We saw that in the Colonial Pipeline case with the ransomware. Those are all seen as good public policy, law enforcement, intelligence goals. But to many in the technology community, that's anathema to this idea that this is an open technology, shouldn't be controlled, shouldn't be centralized. And then I'm going to come to the question of China in this regard. So, Joe, how does the industry, how do the technologists that you deal with, that you sense, deal with that tension? There is the potential use by the government of these technologies, but that's not really how this was built.
So I think that's a discussion that our ecosystem and different nation states, not just this one, need to have, because it's a very powerful technology, and each political philosophy for each different nation state will have to figure out how to situate the technology into its culture. America won the internet. That was very good for America, and that was very good for the people of the world. America won the internet because there was an initial backlash just like this. There were legislation like the Telecom Act of '96 and other pieces. There was a safe harbor approach erected. There was no taxation for a number of years in order to enable the industry to get started. And so let's talk about America rather than the other countries of the world. This technology is more powerful than the internet technology. This technology must be made necessarily complementary to AI technology, which is perhaps an even more powerful technology. And so if I said it before, AI can grow very dangerous. It can also be incredibly empowering if built openly, transparently, governed transparently, built on decentralized protocol rails. There are some great projects doing that. So we really need open source and an open, transparent approach to the marriage of decentralized protocols, crypto, AI, and our technology is going to speed everything up. If you make money move faster, if you make innovation, permissionless innovation move faster, then you're essentially compressing the duration between value creation events closer and closer, and that leads to compounding of value. So it really accelerates the development of a society. And America's superpower is diversity and innovation. So other countries that don't like diversity and don't foster innovation quite as much, they're copycat societies versus net new societies, will not do as well even if they embrace this technology, because that's not their culture. So we need as open, permissionless, and decentralized an approach as possible for America to get the most benefit out of the technology.
Dante, very quickly, and it's not a quick question, we could have a full day conference on this, the challenge of China.
Yeah.
China clearly is trying to control elements of the technology, to Joe's point, sort of in their surveillance state sort of system in many ways. They're also the chief exponent of the ECNY, the digital yuan. They're embedded in the mBridge project, which is trying to innovate cross-border payment settlement through the use of the digital yuan. How do you see the geoeconomic competition with China through the lens of blockchain technology?
Yeah, I mean, the best advertisement for blockchain is perhaps the fact that when the PBOC was studying what to do about a digital currency project, a central bank digital currency project, they actually opted for an architecture completely distinct from blockchain-based payments, in part because of all of the features of preserving privacy and compartmentalization and all the rest. So there's a really important design feature there that is in some ways the best case study for how to win the digital currency space race. The second is, of course, an attempt to export the yuan. And the real undercurrent of this is you don't weaponize a currency, you weaponize the rails on which the currency rides. And the effectiveness of Western sanctions, for example, against Russia is the degrees to which networks like SWIFT will take your phone call. Perhaps many of you in this room or many who might be listening later. And that obligation is an obligation executed by people. And what the technologies around sanctions-resistant payment regimes or alternative payment systems are the rails in which alternative currencies will eventually take off. And so we should be watchful of this. Now, the last quick thing I would say is obviously every central bank in the world, after a certain project that I was involved in 2019 was announced, started embarking on this race of keeping up with the Joneses and launching these central bank digital currency experiments. Most of them, however, are still just that, experiments. All but one major central bank, the ECNY in China, have launched this into production. And my question to this discussion is, do you want the FAA here in the United States flying planes and building jet engines? Or do you want the FAA to effectively designate the rules of safety and conduct in the skies and that we encourage competition? We're going to be very, very starving for choice if, in fact, our central banks in the West become competitors to high street banks and competitors to payments companies. We're better off having rules-based competition, and we're better off to the extent the entities and or the actors that participate are obligated to Western values, obligated to financial crime compliance and other regimes. And a company like Circle, we've proven that not only can you have a standard of compliance that's as good as our peers, you could actually get to a standard further, which is this idea of effective deterrence. If you know that these types of digital currency tools will be responsive, preserve privacy at once, but also be responsive to sanctions and other obligations, it's a powerful tool to export US dollars everywhere, but also at the same time to respect sanctions and other national security imperatives.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the China, I mean, I don't know if everybody here understands the kinds of experiments that China was doing. So, for example, I give you $25 million, or 25 million in the yuan, and I tell you you're allowed to only use it for transportation, and I'm going to track where you're going, and then in 2 weeks, the money disappears from your wallet. Okay, and that's what they did. Then you can use it for food, but not wine. So they have the ability. Now, also superimpose that not only on their own population, but now we know that China is very active in Africa and in South America with building resources, mining, all the other kinds of things they're doing. What if they require those countries to be paid in their digital yuan? Then they track it through the entire system. They see what everybody's spending money on until it gets back to China. And this is one of the key important things that people need to understand about privacy. Though the government we don't I mean, I don't want the government to see every single thing I'm spending. Maybe they don't want me to spend it on wine, or they don't want me to spend it on some women's issues or something else. And so I do think that this ability to decide what you're doing in a productive way, not in any kind of negative or illegal way, is really important for Americans to understand, that protecting the ability to use your money in a way that is not information gathering, in the same way that Joe talked about how the web, we didn't understand how much information people were gathering about us on the internet. This is another thing why a permissionless system on blockchain is so relevant, so important to our own freedoms, and also to the importance of the United States and security.
I'll just add a quick footnote as we go to the audience for questions. I've often said, and we've studied this idea of the Alliance of Financial Rogues. I wrote about it in my book. And this idea of the connection of payment rails between those systems that are either being isolated via sanctions or that are wanting to find alternate ways of transmitting value or settling across borders. And so as you see the alliance between China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Belarus, Venezuela evolve, this question of how this technology might be misused by those actors is an interesting one and an important one to watch. Questions now. Mark. And if you could identify yourself and then ask a quick question.
Mark Kennedy, Wilson Center. My question is on the Chinese digital currency. If it's collecting all that information, data empowers AI models. Are they going to be able to use all that information they're getting in that currency to further empower their AI?
That's a great question. I mean, well, the short answer is yes. And we should also, of course, think of the advent of the Chinese digital currency, central bank digital currency project, as also an example in some respects of soft expropriation of domestic fintechs that were getting a little too big and a little too plucky. And so it's notable that, obviously data is the best resource that you're going to acquire from these types of payment systems in the end. And the type of architecture that we're describing today is one that would protect and compartmentalize people's information. So another way to think of it, and I try not to use too many more analogies, is if data is the new oil, blockchain may very well be a new barrel in which that type of data can be secured in alternative structures. And so there is zero question that the type of information being accrued through reporting up through these entities and these public sector digital currency projects have deep implications for privacy, but also deeply informing AI models and other models.
Joe?
So the question is, can China win the AI race, the AI dominance race? And the answer is maybe. Right now, probably not. Restricting chips, et cetera, will slow them down significantly. But also, there is credible thinking right now that decentralized protocol infrastructure can bring so much compute and so much better data to these decentralized AI systems. So it may be the case that a much bigger decentralized supercomputer can be built with decentralized protocol technology than by buying chips from NVIDIA or AMD.
Next question. Sujit.
Thank you so much. Hi, Sujit Raman, TRM Labs. Thanks to our panelists for a wonderful conversation. I just have a question for you, Joe, as a technologist. Very inspired by your description of Web3, the decentralizing aspects, the liberating aspects in a lot of ways. And yet, I'm curious, as someone who co-founded, Ethereum, bringing it back to the national security argument, Treasury sanctioned Tornado Cash last year, year before. These are smart contracts. These are on the Ethereum blockchain. As somebody, again, as a technologist, when you were starting to put these ideas together of open protocols and, programmable money, so to speak, did you foretell that there could be uses? And I don't mean you individually. I'm just saying as a technologist, is that something that you foresaw? And what was your reaction when the government started to essentially sanction code, is at least how people in the industry would see it? And where do you see risks going forward with relation to these kinds of issues?
Sure. So the decentralized protocol movement, started with BitTorrent, but let's leave that alone, blockchain was invented by whoever Satoshi Nakamoto is, and Satoshi was referencing the financial crisis, essentially. So a lot of people in our ecosystem came into the ecosystem because we were interested in empowerment and protection of the consumer. So not just economic empowerment, but economic agency and political agency, greater agency for people and communities. So that's, I think, critically where it starts from. Another chain of provenance for our technology is the cypherpunks. So the cypherpunks are essentially about using cryptography as a privacy technology. And so privacy is incredibly important to people, people in compromised political situations, people doing business, just standard operating procedure. And there's a tension there. So you shouldn't look first to regulate or dumb down a technology. You should probably regulate some of the ill use cases of that technology. So I never use Tornado Cash. Vitalik Buterin, the inventor of Ethereum, famously said, "Hey, I use it for certain things because people track what I'm doing and don't want that if he's making some sort of political decision to do something." And so that's perfectly legit. Again, it's all about situating uses of the technology in the appropriate political context. There'll be different answers in different nation states.
And if I may, just a very quick add-on, Sujit, it's a great question. And obviously, coming from TRM, you really appreciate the notion of collective defense. That even since the WannaCry ransomware attack, before many of the crypto sort of illicit finance, the companies combating illicit finance in crypto maybe even existed, anybody with a basic internet-connected device was a part of the shared collective witness of where the money flows were going in this WannaCry ransomware attack, which went from 0 to 150 countries over the span of 3 days. You cannot do that with any other form of money movement. And so that alone was a very powerful mitigant against the economic gains in that attack. And at the same time, there's a question to be asked. Irrespective of whether this technology is regulated or not, it exists. And then we have a choice to make both as an industry and as a society. Do good actors stop bad actors from co-opting otherwise neutral or good technologies? And so a company like ours responded to this sanction of Tornado Cash, which is a powerful feature of these digital assets, and they should be used very, very carefully. But then secondarily, we tried to make the case for don't regulate the technology, regulate the activity, be tech neutral in that posture, and again, argue for collective defense. And so I'm happy we have a digital fire brigade that could respond to colonial gas pipeline events, to these types of events and many others. But again, when we're too heavy-handed and we try to put the genie back in the bottle or use the term crypto, short form for cryptography, to be the catch-all term for everything that is happening in the space, it's not monolithic any more than banks are.
And the other thing I think people are upset about in that particular case is, how, if I have open source technology, let's say I put it out for a very good purpose, whatever that purpose might be, and then you take my open source technology and use it for something else. Why am I responsible for what you use? Because I developed a set of algorithms, a set of code, or set of anything that was used for my project. But it's open source. It's available to anybody. Anybody can use it, develop on it, grow on it, etc. Why do I go to jail? Because you then co-opted it to use for something that wasn't a good thing or a bad thing or is illegal in society. So I think we need to figure out where are the bright lines. If I'm going to engage in being a developer, how much risk am I taking that down the line in T+1, T+7, somebody uses what I created for good purposes for bad purposes?
And Donna, just quickly to that point, I think what we've seen with OFAC and FinCEN and the Treasury agencies, whether it's with sanctions or even the 311 action against tumblers and mixers to identify that as a concern of primary money laundering.
Can I just add one piece? Just extending your question a little bit. So is our technology and our ecosystem consistent with the agendas potentially of the United States of America? I would say that there are people in our industry that are very interested in thwarting illicit action and malicious actors, and the technology will be better at that because we will have systems in which we can build in the rules and regulations and monitor and enforce the rules and regulations. So it's not that you'll have to abide by the law. You won't be able to break the law in many as these systems mature. So from a good action perspective, from a national security perspective, we can build on a new foundation of the internet that's hardened by cryptography. So all the way up, the information infrastructure of the planet is notoriously porous, and it was built by academics a long time ago, and the military a little bit, and it's really been just a patchwork of band-aids for decades on top of it. So the internet is a mess.
Yes, right here, and then.
Hi, my name is Jamal Glenn. I'm a venture capital investor. First, I want to say thank you for a wonderful conversation. I don't see blockchain on the council docket as often as I'd like. So my question is one of the relatively less nerdy people in the audience, I'm really interested in this consumer friction that the professor spoke about. So I started buying digital assets in 2015 and naively have never sold them given sort of recent market activity and thinking about taking some money off the table. And I was explaining to my wife how much less easy it is to engage in these transactions than we might do with our Chase account. And so I'm curious, what's missing in terms of decreasing that consumer friction? And then sort of a second question is, if you were to give advice to someone like me who's considering thinking about how I might lend my skills and experience to this movement, what would you say?
Well, I'm not sure I know what all your skills are. Number one, we have so many problems in being able to use digital assets easily. One of them is the taxation problem. So if you want to go and buy a cup of coffee, let's just say with your Ethereum, pretend you can do that. Now you have to pay tax on that because you bought it at a lower price. You bought it in 2015. I am the coffee vendor. I have now to write down that this is property and I got it at this amount of money and it was trading on the market this way, et cetera, and that's problematic. That doesn't work. That doesn't flow. When you use a dollar or when you use a stable coin that Dante makes, it's just based on a dollar. You don't have to worry about the taxation of all of that all the time. I do think, yes, wallets will improve, or the things that we call wallets, which is the addresses that you keep your digital assets in. When you have people like Larry Fink running around talking about that everything in the world, he's the CEO of BlackRock, running around talking that every financial product is going to be digitized, tokenized, et cetera. There are going to be ways in which you're going to be able to use all of these products in both in your normal activities, and then soon, as Joe was talking about, you won't even know that you're using them in a permissionless environment because you'll be able to take them and use them as an asset and be able to yourself put it up for, as collateral for a loan, or anything else that you're going to be using. So that will happen as the friction and the development and the regulations all start working together. You'll be able to see these seamless things happening. And in the same way that people don't look at their phone and say, wow, I'm using the internet, they just go and they go click, 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 and they send a message or they send a text message or whatever else they're doing. So I think that will happen. I'm not sure I know what your skill set, what do you do?
I'm a venture capitalist.
A venture capitalist. Well, you invest. There are so many fantastic companies.
Come on, let's talk. I've got a couple ideas
There are so
for
many
you.
fantastic companies that are coming along in this area. I mean, we talked about Bridge for a second. It was built 2 years ago. It was sold to Stripe for $1 billion. That's a venture capitalist dream in your world. Investigate the projects that are being built on the Ethereum blockchain. A lot of them you can invest in terms of both the equity and also the tokens that they would be using. So I think now, is a really good building time. Usually building happens when prices are down. So because prices are going up, people are going to start being more interested in trading, but build, and there's tons of companies to invest in. And I'm happy to talk to you afterwards about a bunch of the different VCs that are heavily engaged in this area.
Yeah. So the internet and the early web were built with effectively nobody watching. It's just a bunch of technologists kicking their own tires. As it got, and it was hard to use. And there weren't live monetary rails. So when there are bugs in those systems, didn't really matter. Fast forward to the advent of Web 2, e-commerce, et cetera, starts getting very valuable. So we had the problem of having to build a paradigm-shifting information infrastructure, which had live monetary rails out in the open with everybody watching and with a pretty tech-savvy society. So everybody had an opinion. And so it would have been better if it remained very hard for the naive user to use. Unfortunately, there was no regulation about projects. So in our ecosystem, we have innovation after innovation. The innovation comes, there's irrational exuberance, markets go up, there's a blow off top, and everybody licks their wounds for 9 months. And then we have this amazing new foundational construct, a primitive, a Web3 primitive that we can put in our tool belt and build sophisticated systems with. So we've seen that over and over. We had no regulation, and so bad projects follow the good projects they copy, and then malicious projects just blow things up. If we didn't have the Binances of the world making it easy to onboard a lot of naive users, and if we had regulation, if we were just building this thing slowly, there wouldn't have been harms. But that greed and fear is human nature, and so that was the environment that we had to build in. User interfaces are getting better. They're about to get great. And so what that means is we're moving into an intents-based architecture. So you state your intention, and for instance, in a wallet or in an application, you'll be able to type your intention. I want to swap this token for this token, or set me up in an environment where I can play this game. An AI will translate that into an intents description language. There are a few of them out there that are maturing, and there'll be lots of them for different niches in the global economy. The intents are sent to solver networks. So there are a bunch of those where lots of independent actors are just competing in a market to satisfy your ask. So the solver networks will work with market makers on different networks. Market makers will take their own risk from their own inventory to satisfy your request. So we think some of the best bridge builders, bridges between different blockchain systems, believe that we'll be able to get that whole thing down to about 2 seconds. And you have a very easy for naive user to use user interface.
Follow up on 2 points.
And it's good for for the naive users that weren't able to access our technology or weren't able to get out of our technology.
Let's go with one more question here, and then quick answers if we can, and then I think we'll close it out.
Thank you. I'm Barbara Matthews. I run a data company, actually. Anyone who wants to fund our ability to put our data on the blockchain, I want to talk to you.
Have you met Jamal?
Yeah.
Yeah. I intend to.
Have breakfast with Jamal.
But I have a question about geopolitics and geoeconomics. We haven't talked about our friends in Europe today. And in Europe, policymakers are not shy about promoting as a value proposition the ability to achieve economic sovereignty in Europe. What they mean by that is economic sovereignty independent of the United States. It is true from Charles de Gaulle to the present. Europeans have been railing against the US dollar, but a digital euro could provide them the means to do that. If you could provide some perspective on how you think the technology is going to create opportunity and tension with our friends in the transatlantic space. And we could also talk about the tokenization of securities markets in London. But
Sure. Well, I'm happy to start there because in some ways I have a transatlantic company. So Circle today is licensed from C2 Shining Sea in the United States as a money transmitter on a level playing field with the household names from PayPal to Stripe and others in between. And our core product, of course, is a digital dollar known as USDC. But Europe, over the last 5 years, in part in response to two fears, big tech and China tech, have embarked on the furthest reaching body of law in this industry ever. So on the one hand, the industry got what it wanted, which was regulations and rules and legal clarity. And so the Europeans have a body of law known as the Markets and Crypto Assets Framework, which will be to crypto what MiCA was to privacy. And as a result of that, we have also a digital euro-denominated stablecoin known as EURC. And what we promised the Europeans is the second you give us a regime in which we could export this from the United States to Europe, we will do so. And we've done so out of France. And now a company, Gemini, a crypto exchange, has also followed Circle and has chosen France as its domicile. So therein lies an argument that where you put legal clarity to bear, investment, capital, and companies will follow. And what Europe has done, for example, is anchor stablecoin activity against e-money. The United States is an outlier in the advanced economies and not having a national payments charter. And if you want to ring fence the activity, you don't have people guess which asset is a security, which one is a commodity, and then tell the market to figure it out. You actually create legal swim lanes and regulatory swim lanes across these agencies. So the Europeans have done that. But the challenge, of course, is as exactly you described, Barbara, it's a regime that's protectionist in nature. There's aspects of it that are a little too prescriptive for comfort. And begging the question, will it also have answered Mario Draghi's indictment of Europe, which is that being expert at regulation is not a great way to take out the drag coefficient of friction and overregulation and building an entrepreneurial base. And so we're trying to be a transatlantic company. We're also trying to encourage our friends in the United Kingdom to finally get their rulemaking in place so that every major financial center in the Western world can sort of be a part of this technology. And I'd be remiss to say that if we continue to think of digital assets and blockchain as merely a financial technology, then we have failed to properly express that it's like the internet itself. It's foundational, it's cross-cutting, and it's not industry-specific. But the rule set in Europe is in place, and companies like ours follow it. The last one, it's a little bit of an indictment on the U.S. policy conversation. By virtue of the Europeans doing what the Americans have not, digital dollars like USDC enjoy more legal and regulatory clarity statutorily in Europe at the whole of region level than they do in the United States. That should be an indictment on us. And my hope, sincerely going into 2025, is that we actually get Congress at long last to answer their own appeals from the President's Working Group on Financial Markets and other bodies that have simply said, let's just create a level playing field and a floor for these activities to continue existing and enjoying clarity in the United States as well.
And also, stable dollars vastly dominate any other denomination. And so as long as the U.S. doesn't harm that natural dynamic, the U.S. dollar is likely to, or the U.S. is likely to see free dollarization of many nation states.
And just to be clear, the digital assets crypto space has asked for many, many, many years to have regulatory clarity. We have not asked for no laws. We've asked for clarity. So exactly as what Dante said, What are we? Is this a commodity? Is this a security? Who regulates us? What are the requirements in terms of the reserves I need? If I'm a stable coin, where do I keep those? Is it supposed to be under banking? Is it supposed to be under the Fed? Who's supposed to be under in order for us to be able to move forward? So let's get this done. Let's get the regulatory clarity there. Let's build, let's be competitive, and let's keep the U.S. as the predominant place for, not only dollars, but for innovation and for growth of this really interesting technology and all the applications that it can have.
It's a great way to end the conversation. Please join me in thanking Joe, Donna, and Dante.